Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Hello, everybody. My name is Bullus, and I go to Cal Poly. Any Cal Poly students in here? Oh, no. Well, there's a man that was contemplating giving his life to Jesus Christ, and he looked at this pastor and says, "Do you know why Jesus has so little friends?" And the pastor says, "Why?" He says, "Because of the way he treats the ones he got." And I know that personally because Romans 8:28 first says that, "And all things work together for good to them that love God." And the secret is, I had to keep reminding myself that as long as I know that I love God, then all these things which are happening to me are happening for a reason. And as the book of Jeremiah speaks about it, he says, the Lord knew me while I was in my mother's womb. So therefore, everything that would ever happen to me, God already knew about it and planned it from the beginning before I was born. Well, I'll get into a little bit of it. I have 15 minutes, so I'll just share with you about 3 stories or so. Well, my life actually begun very sweet. It wasn't that tough at all, actually. My dad was a lawyer, you know. My mom was like a nurse, and like we were living good in the island of Fiji. And at the age of 5, I remember clearly I would have visions of heaven. I wouldn't be asleep. There was one day I was in sitting down, and I see this 10-foot man without a shirt just appear, and all of a sudden I was in this room full of gold like everywhere, and these men put their hands, they stood like this and did this, and when they did this, floods of water would just come out of the walls and just flood the earth, and I was just standing there like, whoa, how'd you do that? And then I would also have visions where I would see myself as a grown person, but there was a house so beautiful behind me, and yet this angel would be like, "By the way, that's your house." And it wasn't a dream I was having. Well, as time went on, I quickly saw how wicked human beings really were. Well, in Fiji, we took a lot of vacations, and we went to a family friend's house in like another area of the island. And they were wonderful family friends. And my dad and the man and the whole parents left. And they left their son to babysit me and my sister and brother. And so while I was playing outside, I hear him call my name, and he was in the room. He called my name, and I ran into the room thinking he wanted to ask me a question or whatever, or feed me, I didn't know. And he asks me to come on the bed. I thought he had something to give me. As soon as I sat on that bed, something took place that moment that changed my whole life. He sexually assaulted me, and that began a trend in my life I never told anybody till I was 18. First of all, I became angry inside of me. Not only angry, I became lustful myself. Not only that, my biggest challenge came that I started questioning whether was it because I was gay or was I straight. And, you know, coming from a Pentecostal, my dad, a Pentecostal, I would hear the message a lot in church that it was a sin, and so I would keep telling myself, "No, you're not gay. No, you're not gay." No, but this spirit kept telling me, "Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes," and I kept fighting against it. I fought against it. I fought against it. It was so bad at times. I would lock myself in the closet and just start crying and yelling and asking God. So I developed hatred in my heart for this one person. And as I was growing, I told myself that as soon as I was able to leave my family's house, I would go back to Fiji and I would get rid of that guy. Because number one, I was going through unnecessary pains that he had caused me. And so And by that time, I developed how to study the Word of God. And the Bible talks about, I've given you power to trample over snakes and scorpions and all rulers of darkness, and by no means shall the enemy hurt you. So I declared that I was going to start declaring against this spirit, because at that moment, I came to understand that being gay actually was a spirit that disturbed people, and they accepted it because the spirit told them that's who they are. And so at that moment, I started going through warfare after warfare, but I never got rid of that spirit. And one day I gave up. I came to God. I was like, God, I am not gay, first of all. And I need to be saved from this spirit. I need to end this. I've declared every verse. I even used that same example when Satan came to Jesus and he says, change this stone into bread or jump off this mountain. Jesus said, away from me, Satan, it is written. He would always go back to the word. And that's exactly what I did, but it didn't work for me. I said, what was wrong? And at that quiet moment in that closet, I heard him say to me in my spirit, he says, the beginning of your healing is first you must forgive. Forgive who, Jesus? I'm not forgiving that guy. I never began to heal until I stood up one day and I said, Lord, I forgive him from the bottom of my heart. And then I began to heal where that incident left. Now, people might ask when I first started telling this story, why would God let something like this happen to you? I believe personally that the Lord allows things to happen to us, number one, not for us to question him, but to get a better understanding of who he is. And so, for example, we saw last week of the story of Joseph, how his brothers sold him, yet when his brothers came for deliverance, he says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And through that circumstance, not only did I learn how to forgive, but I got to see the power of God and how his love could not be hindered by what we do as human beings. And his love delivered me. Well, a lot of things happened after that, but the next incident that changed my life as well was in 1994. We were in Nigeria, and my dad just finished preaching at a church, and my mom was sleeping because she was sick in the house. And you see, in Africa, demons are not shy at all. If you were ever to take a mission trips to Africa into those villages, missionaries are known to have seen demons or something, attacking them. Well, my mom was sleeping in the room, and then all of a sudden she had a vision where a short demon, a midget demon, literally came into the room and said to her, I'm about to kill one of your sons. And then she dares him in the name of Jesus to get away. And at that moment, what happened was, my mom had a lab in the house. And one of the workers in the house left the lab open, and my little brother, whom was 16 months, rolled a ball into the room and found something called caustic soda on the floor. It's an alkaline. He drank it. And instantly, when I ran into the room, because I heard him yelling, I found my little brother on the floor, bleeding from his mouth, and he was just about to die because that caustic soda, I don't know if you put it on the carpet, it just starts eating away the carpet, starts burning. He was bleeding out of every nose and everything. So that's when I ran into my mom's room, and she just said, I just saw a vision that Satan said he was going to kill one of my sons. And that story started something for 8 years. So from then on, 8 years of my life was spent either in the hospital or just foster care or just like there were different places because we lost all the money we had and all. But 2 weeks after that incident, I was at church. We were at church, and it was Holy Communion church, and usually the kids sat at the back while the parents were in front. And during Holy Communion, this is just 2 weeks after my little brother just took that and my parents were in the hospital with him. We were in church, I was depressed that I couldn't see my parents or whatever. All of a sudden, the pastor falls dead while handing the Holy Communion. I was wondering what is happening here. And then all of a sudden, everybody gets up and starts running out the door. We're like, what's happening? When I looked out, the church was surrounded by Muslims heavy armed with weapons in Nigeria. And they just started shooting into the church. And they came running, and we were running out the other end. People were being thrown over fences, and I watched people die right in front of me. Like, I watched the tree, people bleeding, and just all over the place. And I ran outside too, and then a man I've never met grabs me from the waist, lifts me, and just starts running with me. And at this time, they're shooting, cars on fire, dead bodies on the floor, and we're just running. We kept running until we hit a house we saw, and we didn't even ask whose house it was. We just literally went, we was open, we ran in, and we hid under the bed. And then I looked at this man, then I said, Jesus is going to get those people, huh? And then he goes, shut up. And so, and so what happened after that was the lady came back into the room and says, you guys need to get out of my house right now. My husband was one of those shooting at you guys. So she grabs me and we just start running. Later, I found out that the very man that saved me was a Muslim and gave his life to Jesus, I guess, that day. The reason why they came to shoot us was actually because of something my dad did, and they were coming to actually shoot my dad. And the only reason why my dad wasn't shot on that day was because he was in the hospital with my little brother. And what my dad did was, you see, in Africa, the Muslim leaders are called al-hajis. And al-hajis have the ability to get about 3 wives or 4 of the age of 13, 16, 12. And a Christian man came to my dad and says, please, my daughter has just been taken by an al-haji, and I need you to please go get her back. And my dad went and led the girl to the Lord, and they got pissed that my dad took a 13-year-old from a 40-year-old man. So they came to kill on that day because of that incident. Again, I developed hatred inside of me, nightmares from all these issues. And yet God comes to me again and says, forgive. Now this leads me into the third thing, because of time, that changed my life. A lot of things happened because over the 8 years, my family, we had to keep traveling. We had to keep traveling from place to place because every hospital we went to around the world told us, your son is dead. He's done. Because by this time we went to England and they took out his esophagus and used his colon as the esophagus. And he had, by this time, about 6 or 9 different major transplants around the world, and he was being fed from a tube. And at times we're at home and the tube would fall out and his bile would start eating away his stomach right in front of us. And we would go to the hospital and they would be like, guys, he's dead. And we were even interviewed on BBC World News because my brother was one of the first people to ever take it and live. And the reason why he lived is because in the day he took it, he was dying and the doctors pronounced him dead. But that in that moment, my dad heard a voice that told him, he shall not die, but live and declare the wondrous works of the Lord. And the Lord clearly told him, if you will believe that he shall live, I shall give him life, even though everybody else says he shall die. At that moment, I learned in my life that the reality to a Christian is not what you hear, see, or feel. It is simply what Jesus says. Every time you're in a situation you don't understand, seek for what Jesus has to say about it, because only he can change the circumstance. Well, we held on to that verse. We went to England, he had a big transplant. We went to Israel, he had a big transplant. We went to Australia, he had a big transplant. We just went from place to place. There were days nurses would claim they made a mistake and overdose him. And he would start foaming from the mouth, right about to die. His eyes would turn, it's white, and then you hear Jesus comes in. He will not die, but live. And we're like, are you serious right now? And then we kept believing. But all this time, I became angry in my spirit. I became very bitter. To make things worse, every place, ladies and gentlemen, racism is still alive. And it's not as bad here, but I've traveled the world to see that it is still alive at a measure. I've been hit in the face for being black before. I have been in a class where even the teacher would stand and they would laugh at me because I was black. Actually, I've been to a place where because I didn't dress like everybody else, like literally, I've been put in the corner before and just wailed upon, just beaten. I've been spat upon. A rock's been thrown at me before just for being who I was. And then on top of it, claiming that I was a Christian in some countries didn't help the cause at all. It didn't, but I still stood there, I'm a Christian. And so out of all these things that happen, there's a tons more. I can tell you, I've spent days in the hospital. I mean, first of all, water was poured on me, all hot water. I got pictures to prove this. My whole body was burned before skin came back. I swallowed a wristwatch battery. I've been taken to the hospital. The doctors were like, he's about to die in 24 hours if we don't take it out, so we're going to have to check his stool for the next 8 hours. So they stood there with hoses, every time I used the restroom. No, nothing came out. They were like, let's take him into operation. They took an x-ray. It's gone. I've woken up before where I had a big old pouch hanging out to my stomach. I go to the hospital. They're like, you're bleeding internally. What happened? Did you go in a fight? I was like, no. It'll heal by itself. It just keeps going. I've almost drowned in water, 3 days in the hospital. My life just keeps going. A lot of things just keeps piling up. But this is how I met the Lord. I believe this is how I met him. So all these things are happening to me, everything. And to make things worse, I'm dyslexic and I never do good in school. So teachers would tell me, like, seriously, you need to go find a sport because, reading is not your thing, So I was being rejected by teachers. I never thought my family understood me because the greatest form of loneliness that I had to go through, and it was the biggest pain I've ever gone through because I actually believe I've been I almost went into the crazy mode before. I've been so depressed before that I would close my eyes and sit there for hours trying to tell myself I don't exist because of the pain that was happening around me. And when I come out of this weird mode, I'd be like, dang, I still exist. And life was just very bitter. So one day I decided it was time to end it. I went to my dad and I asked him, Father, because my dad, he's a fiery preacher. One day he was standing on the pulpit, if you kill yourself, you shall go to hell. So I was like, there goes my plan. So I went to him and I was like, Dad, are you sure that if I took it, by the way, do I have to die naturally to make it to heaven, or can I end it myself and still make it there? Of course, what is a dad going to tell you? Boy, you better not be trying to kill yourself, I was like, all right, I'm not, dang. So one night, I turned off the lights because I had enough. And usually the closet was my best friend because I felt if I locked myself, then that was my world. In darkness, no one saw. And I would cry because just imagine yourself, everything you did failed. Everything. Nobody wanted you. Everyone made fun of you. You went to school. They made fun of you. The teachers made fun of you, so you can't go to the teacher and go help me. Everything was wrong. I sat there and I was and this is when I cried out to God. And it seemed that why would God take me through all of that loneliness? It was because he was my only companion when I had nobody. And those were the times I studied scripture, but things were still hard for me. And I said, Lord, I heard they said that you have a purpose for every single person that is born on this earth. I want to know why I was born. Because the way I look at it, you just started by giving me all these wonderful heavenly visions and then gave me over to Satan. I don't get it. And so, in that silent moment, I heard this voice as clear as day in my heart. I can't explain it to you. I didn't hear it audibly. But he says, I want you to fast for 7 days. I was desperate. So I said, okay, Jesus, I will fast for 7 days. On the 4th day, I heard that same voice come to me and came to me and said to me, by the way, you're going to be a pastor. And I was like, you treat me like crap. And then you're going to say, I'm going to serve you? He was like, yeah, you know. And so right at the edge of my fasting, there was this big old crusade, and I went. You know, this guy was preaching, and as I stood there, just this woman walks up to me. I've never seen her before in my life. Walks up to me, and I thought somebody followed her with a torchlight like that, like, because her face was just lit up, and looks at me in my eye and says, "Do you know what you're going to do for Jesus? You are going to be a pastor." I said, okay. That's the time I came and I started studying scriptures. Now, because of time, let me end it here. Luke chapter 9, verses 23 says, I'm paraphrasing, "If any man seeks to follow after me, he must first deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me." All the pains that I went through, the Lord made me understand that He was taking me through a stage of self-denial, where I got to the point where I knew that I was not the one in control, but it was Him. And only He could move my mountains. And if I could just trust in Him, and as I started with that verse, where all things work together for the good of them that love God, He would see me through. Pick up my cross, where now, since I never existed, but He exists in me, then as Jesus says, I also have been sent by my Father to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and follow Jesus. And so if I'm to end it, I would say that all of everything that has happened to me or will happen to me, because I believe, He told me the other day, He was like, by the way, don't get too comfortable. I'm sending you back to those that have persecuted you. I said, do what you want. And at that moment, I came to understand that my whole life, everything that had ever happened to me, was to get me to that one verse. For me to live is Christ. And for me to die, to meet my Father, is gain. Thank you.
Wow.